Alright, let's start with a question. What if I told you that a broken collarbone and a 3-week forced vacation might have been the best thing to happen to Aprilia's MotoGP team this season? Yeah, I know that sounds insane, but stick with me here. Because the story of Marco Bezzecchi and Jorge Martin's mid-season resurgence isn't just about injuries or bike setups, it's about psychology, resilience, and how adversity can either break you or make you hungrier. And honestly, this might be the most fascinating case study in modern MotoGP. Let's rewind. Bezzecchi starts the season looking like a future world champion, wins, podiums, leading the standings. Then boom, crashes, a race ban for hitting a marshal which, let's be real, was a PR nightmare, and getting taken out by his own teammate. By mid-season, he's not just mentally drained, he's physically broken. Collarbone surgery, knee damage, and 3 weeks off that was supposed to be a reset, but felt more like a death spiral. But here's the twist, that time off became his reset button. Not because he suddenly had more skill, but because his brain got to hit pause on the chaos. And when he came back at Silverstone, he wasn't just riding through pain, he was riding with purpose. That double podium wasn't luck, it was a mental breakthrough. He proved to himself he wasn't a fraud, and that matters more than people realize in a sport where confidence is currency. Now let's talk about Jorge Martin. Dude was leading the championship, but felt like a fraud. Slow, crashing, lacking confidence, sound familiar? But here's the kicker, Aprilia didn't overhaul their bike tech. They just tweaked the setup, going back to an older configuration that gave him the front-end feel he'd lost. And suddenly, he's winning sprints and extending his lead. Wait, so the problem wasn't the bike's raw speed, it was the rider's trust in it. That's the deeper story here. Modern MotoGP bikes are so complicated that even the smallest disconnect between rider and machine can tank a season. Martin's comeback wasn't about horsepower, it was about psychology. When you feel in control, you ride bolder. It's the same reason a tennis player finds their serve again after a slump, it's all upstairs. But here's what most people miss. Aprilia's real challenge isn't Ducati or Marquez. It's the fact that their riders have to stop sabotaging themselves. Bezzecchi and Martin spent half the season making avoidable mistakes, crashing, clashing, letting frustration boil over. Even Raul Fernandez chucked his bike after a bad tire choice. But the Silverstone podium lockout showed what happens when they channel that frustration into focus. And that's the bigger question for Noel. Can they build a culture where riders lift each other up instead of dragging each other down? Because Ducati's got the numbers, but Aprilia's got the speed, if they can just keep their own egos in check. Let's zoom out. This isn't just about one team's mid-season turnaround. It's about how elite sports are as much about mental endurance as physical skill. Bezzecchi's injuries forced him to slow down, and paradoxically, that made him faster. Martin's setup tweak wasn't revolutionary, it was a reminder of what he'd lost. And Aprilia's factory team. They are learning that winning championships isn't about perfection, it's about recovery. Every rider drops points, every team hits slumps. The difference is who can stare down the setbacks and say, nah, not today. So what's next? Well, Marquez will be Marquez, unpredictable, genius, and occasionally his own worst enemy. Ducati's still the 800-pound gorilla. But if Aprilia's riders keep this up, if they actually start working as a unit instead of rivals, this could get spicy. I'm not ready to crown them yet. 10 races is a lot of chaos, but what we saw at Silverstone wasn't a fluke. It was a statement. And honestly, that's the most exciting part of this whole saga. Because in a sport where milliseconds decide winners, sometimes the biggest gains come not from the garage, but from the mind.